Hi everyone and welcome back to Mindful Mondays. After receiving some feedback from our listeners, we've decided to add a couple of case studies to this series. Case studies are definitely easier to learn from because they are real life examples and common things that many of us might have gone through. So today we'll be talking about an emotional abuse study and Raman will guide us through that through Zoom.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Mindful Mondays. Today, we will be answering a question that was asked of us when we were on the radio a few weeks back. The caller had called in and asked about what they could do to overcome low self-confidence and low self-esteem and other things that was a result of childhood emotional abuse. So today we're going to talk about two parts of us that can be impacted by abuse in our childhood and what we can then do about it to regain control over those two parts. There are other parts that can be impacted. We're just concentrating on the two today. So two parts of us that can be impacted. First and foremost, it's important to understand that as humans, we are meant to be within a community to feel safe and secure. Our actual system, our physiological system, is dependent on that. So when we are born, because we cannot raise ourselves, we're dependent on someone else to support that. And the first community that we enter when we are born is that of our families. If our family system is safe and we have a sense of security, then we can develop skills to regulate our own emotions properly. Our brain is able to think clearly, we're able to learn, and we grow to be able to deal with our daily stressors in an effective way and then come back to a place where we're calm and alert. Now, if that family unit, if that sense of community and sense of security is negatively impacted by emotional abuse, the two parts that can be impacted, again, these are just two of many, two parts that can be impacted is our protective mechanism, what we do at that time to cope with whatever is happening, and the other part is how we see ourselves. So what I mean by the protective mechanism is that when we are challenged by something or our sense of security is challenged, naturally, without us thinking about it, our nervous system reacts and tries to protect us so that we can survive. And when we're children, we're doing this subconsciously. Even as adults, for most of us, we're doing it without awareness. And it just simply happens. Our nervous system is built to help us survive, to help us connect, and to also help us reproduce. But in terms of the survival piece, there are a few ways that our nervous system can support that survival. One is if as a child, when you're being emotionally abused, you react in an angry way, and that makes the abuser kind of just stop for the moment. If that is to happen, you learn to cope in a protective way through anger, through aggression. And at that time, it worked for you. Another one is maybe you got anxious, you felt scared, or there was so much energy in your body that there was hyperactivity happening. So aggression is one, anxious, scared, hyperactivity is another. And the third is that maybe you withdrew and or were depressed. When we withdraw, we hide. That's another one. All three of those are ways to cope with things that impact our sense of safety. Now, here's the part that impacts our adulthood. Those coping mechanisms in childhood actually helped us survive. But now in adulthood, those same coping mechanisms will not work the same way in those relationships. So for example, if as a child you learn to get angry and maybe aggressive, that coping mechanisms helped you survive then, but now in relationships as an adult, it may not be working. It might be causing problems in relationships. Same goes with the anxiety, same goes with the withdrawal and depression. What worked at one time, what worked as a coping mechanism as one time is no longer serving us today. So what can we do to begin regaining control of that and learning to cope with the stressors or threats to our sense of safety when we feel insecure or we feel a bit threatened? What can we do to shift how we respond to that? One thing that we can do is becoming aware of how it is that you respond to threat. And the threat doesn't always have to be massive. That threat can be someone looking at us weird, That threat could be even our brain telling us, oh, that person must be thinking about this about me. That inside feels uncomfortable. That's enough of a threat for us to go into protective mechanisms. So start becoming aware of that. What is my protective mechanism? How do I defend myself? What do I notice in my body that happens when I feel threatened? When you start to do that and you become aware of it, you can then start developing a relationship with it in the present moment. So, hey aggression, hey, anger. At one time when I was younger, you served me. You helped protect me. Now I understand why you're here. However, I know you're trying to protect me. However, that way of protection is actually negatively impacting either my life or even how I feel about myself. So it's kind of like a thank you, but no thank you at this time. And you can do that with any sort of defense mechanism, even if it's withdrawal and you notice a little bit of shutdown happening when someone says something to you. Becoming sensitive to criticism is a result of emotional abuse. Withdrawing or being scared or aggressive, these are all results of emotional abuse. So noticing them, understanding them as surviving mechanisms when you were younger, and now developing that relationship of, okay, hey, you're shutting down. I'm just going to ask you to just stay a little open. You don't have to talk. You don't have to actually open up, but don't shut down fully inside. Start developing that relationship with your own body so that that can change and you can over time react differently. Now, the other part of us that does get impacted, especially with emotional abuse, but any form of childhood abuse really, is how we see ourselves. So our self-confidence and our self-esteem get impacted. Self-confidence is what we believe of our own ability. Can we do this or can we not? And self-esteem is our thoughts about ourselves. What do we actually think about ourselves? What's that dialogue that's happening inside about me? And now, if emotional abuse, if somebody was constantly putting you down or comparing you to others, you're never like them, or that person, the neighbor's kid is better. Your sibling does this and you're not able to, whatever it is. Anywhere where we're put down, anywhere where our confidence was impacted, our ability or who we are, and we're being told that that's negative or less than, eventually we personalize that, we take it in, and that becomes our thought process and conversation about ourselves. And now in adulthood, it impacts how we are. Well, it does in childhood as well, but we may become aware of it now that it's impacting our relationships, our ability to work or succeed, or even achieve the goals that we want to achieve for ourselves. So now how do we start taking power back of how we see ourselves? First and foremost, I call it the internal bully. If this voice inside, not necessarily voice, but if the dialogue inside is that of a bully that constantly puts you down, let's say you're studying, and this voice says, hey, you know what, Raman, you're not going to pass. You're going to fail anyways. I call that a bully. That's not very nice. It'll probably either shut me down or get me more anxious where I can't even focus. So first and foremost, recognize the self-critic or that bully. Start noticing what you're thinking about. Start noticing your thoughts. Kind of step back and observe them. What am I thinking about? How do I talk about myself inside? And once you do that, then start pointing it out. Oh, hey, that's the critic. Or, oh, hey, that's the bully. Whatever it is, whatever word, whatever image works for you. When we start to do that, we begin to separate ourselves. And what that separation really is that as children, we don't have that dialogue until we learn it from all that's around us and all these different cues. And now we begin to separate it and learn about where we are today versus what is being said within our head about us. And eventually we want to get to a place where we can challenge those thoughts, even in the tiniest ways. So for example, again, I'm studying and the critic or the bully says, Raman, you're going to fail anyways. Well, the thing is, when I have that thought, I'm going to feel that way. And because I have low self-esteem and low self-confidence, I'm going to believe it. But eventually, there may have been that one time I studied and I passed, or someone else studied and they passed, there's some sort of evidence that if I study, I might just pass, or there's an evidence that I did study and I did pass. Eventually, we start standing up to that critic, we start standing up to that bully, and we find evidence that stands up for how we actually want to see ourselves today. And that's really important. How do I want to react to things when I feel threatened or where I feel insecure? How do I want to react? And secondly, how do I want to think about myself? How do I want to feel about myself? And what beliefs do I want of myself? If we know those, then we know what we want to work towards. I hope this was helpful. Please leave comments below and join us again next week for our Mindful Mondays. Thank you.